Today's video is over rental properties as a source of passive income. I'm your professor, Dr. Stephen Haggard. I hear a lot from my students who they talk about wanting to get into the rental property game because they view rental properties as a good source of passive income. In other words, income you don't have to immediately work to earn. And so it sounds great, like this cash machine that spits out rent each month. But that's not the whole story. So let's get into this. What all goes into owning a rental home? And I guarantee you I'm not going to cover all of it. First of all, how should we think of real estate? We should think of, especially rental real estate, we should think of it like bonds. Remember, bonds have a face value, in other words, a cash amount you're going to receive at the end of the bond's life. And you might think of this as the amount of money that you would earn by selling the house. And then it pays out a series of fixed payments over its life. These are called coupons, and they represent interest payments. And the price of the bond would be the price of the house up front, and these coupons would be like the rental payments. Now, the rental payments aren't quite like a bond in that they can go up over time, but not over the course of a given lease. Now, why am I making this comparison to bonds? Because we say famously that bonds have no upside. They really only have downside. If you're lucky, you'll get paid as promised. But there are risks with bonds, and one of those risks is default risk. The risk that the company that you buy the bond from will just stop paying the coupons, and so they will not pay as promised. And then there's the risk of the value of the bond going down. As interest rates go up, bond values go down. And we see similar with houses. As the housing market fluctuates, the value of your rental property will too. So let's think about this from a diversified portfolio perspective. We say in finance that you need at least 30 stocks in your portfolio to be diversified. But we say you're better off to have around 200. Now, let's assume that you were able to amass 200 rental homes in your community. Would that mean that you're well diversified? The answer is no, because the diversification benefit comes from people holding things that are less than perfectly correlated with each other. And so stocks, although they are positively correlated, they are not going to be as highly correlated as your cash flows from rental properties. Let me give you some examples. What's going to happen to all of the house property or your rental property values in your community if there's a real estate bust like we had back in 2007, 2008? The answer is that they're all going to go down together. And so that correlation is going to be very, very high. And so that points away from diversification benefit from holding so many rental houses. And then we also have the problem of rents. If you get into the market when rents are high, you will end up paying a lot for the house, but then someone could come in and build new rental units. If you have more supply and the same demand, guess what's going to happen to the rents on your properties? And not just on one of them, but on all of them as they come off lease. This is an issue that we're seeing here in the town where I live right now. People have built these huge apartment complexes, luxury apartment complexes, and now we have people who are unable to rent their homes, or they're having to accept lower rents simply because there's just so much inventory available. And it's not just lower end stuff. You can see the same thing going on in New York City with Billionaires Row next to Central Park. So it doesn't matter the price of the market. This problem can happen in any rental market. Okay, now let's talk about tenants. I've probably said it before in some of my videos, but people are scumbags. And what do I mean by that? People are rationally self-interested. We know that. And so we know that people are going to look after themselves first. And then we see that on top of that, some people are just downright mean. And so they will do things that don't bring them any benefit but cost you. So let's talk about the sort of things that tenants might do. First of all, we know they're not going to treat your house the same way that you would treat your house, because it's a rental. People just don't treat them as well. In fact, my landlords have always been surprised that when they get their property back from us, it's in better shape than when we rented it out. But we're odd. The reason they're surprised is because my wife and I are odd in that way. Okay, so what does that mean to you as a landlord? So you're going to have higher maintenance costs because things that aren't taken care of as well tend to develop bigger, more expensive problems. And so let's say if you had a small leak at your own house, you might get right in there and fix it. But in a rental house, it would likely go unreported until the floor was sopping wet and rotted out and had become dangerous, at which point the tenant would alert you. It would have been quite easy to have fixed the leak when it was still a drip, but now you're going to have to replace the floor, and that's a far more expensive proposition. Let's talk about your time too. When your toilet is clogged at your house, what do? You unclog it. When a tenant's toilet gets clogged, what do? Call you. And when do they call you? Usually at a really inconvenient time. And so people, because they have this ability to reach out to someone to fix all the little things that come up that inconvenience them, they'll do that. And so they'll take up a lot of your time. I was telling my dissertation advisor that I was thinking of becoming he called it a slumlord. I was thinking about becoming a landlord. And he said, that's a good way to give yourself a minimum wage job. I said, how so? He says, well, you're not going to make a lot of money at it to begin with after you think about your mortgage payments on those properties, and you're going to end up spending a lot of time working on those properties, and as a result you'll wind up with about minimum wage for your efforts. Okay, now let's talk about things that renters can do to your house that can cause big headaches for you. In this part of the country, we have a lot of problem with people setting up methamphetamine labs. And a methamphetamine lab is a really, really nasty thing. In fact, they have to do what's called a toxic waste cleanup on any of these labs when they find them, because the chemicals used in that process and the byproducts are so toxic. And you're lucky if all you get out of this is a toxic waste cleanup. There's also a good chance that this lab is going to catch on fire, and when one of these labs catches fire, it does a lot of damage to your rental house. And what is the biggest recourse that a landlord has about damage incurred by tenants? The landlords that I know say usually all they get out of it is the security deposit. And so if they cause more damage than the security deposit, you're basically just out of luck, and you're going to eat that difference. Also, pets. You may specifically forbid pets in the rental agreement. Is that going to stop people from having pets? Absolutely not. I talked to a guy who was a house flipper, and one time he went and bid on a house that had been in foreclosure. And he was surprised that he was the only person to bid on it. And the house, which he had been in, had a dog there had urinated on the drywall. And so he just thought he would just rip out the drywall and the carpet, basically gutting the entire place, and replace all that, and then everything would be fine. And when he did the math on that, it made good sense to work it in that way. And so he bought the house, and he got in there, and he gutted it all. He got rid of the drywall, he got rid of the carpet, he did what he could to clean the subfloor and the studs, and then he starts putting stuff back together. And it doesn't take long after the paint's dry for that strong paint smell to go away, for the smell of dog pee to come back. And so this is another thing that your tenants can do to you. They can permanently impair the value of your rental property simply by having pets. Okay, so you're saying, well, what am I going to do now for passive income now that you've shot down my dreams of being a real estate mogul? Well, you have a couple of options. First of all, there are mutual funds full of dividend-paying stocks, and they make periodic payments too, similar to the periodic payments you receive from rental properties. But these mutual funds are well diversified. They have many different stocks in them, and the correlation between those stocks is much lower than the correlation between the cash flows from your rental homes. And so you're getting the benefit of diversification, and you also have an asset that you don't have to drive by and keep an eye on and worry about people burning down. You could also do bond mutual funds. These are mutual funds that own a lot of different bonds and collect the coupons on those bonds, and then pass along periodic cash flows to the owners of the mutual funds. And so this is another good way to get diversification in your portfolio at the same time that you are getting passive income. Now, I wrote these ideas down on my own, and I thought about them, and I thought, well, I should probably talk to someone who actually works in this area before I record this video. So I reached out to a buddy who is a real estate professor, and I asked him to look at these things, and he said yes, that I was dead on with my points. And he added one more thing. He said most investors get into rental houses after a bad experience with the stock market. And given the returns that we saw in 2018 on the S&P 500, it's not surprising that now in 2019, when I'm recording this video, that a lot of people are talking about getting into rental houses for passive income. But I want to share a thought with you, and that is, historically, the S&P 500 has returned around 10%. What would be the return on your rental house portfolio? Can you even figure it out? Undoubtedly you can't, because you don't know what your different expenses are going to be for owning those homes. You don't know what's going to happen to the value of those things, those homes. There are all sorts of unknowns. And so these are things that you should take into account before you become a real estate baron. Now, as with a stock portfolio, you should always keep a diversified portfolio, and advice is the same way. So you've got lots of people out there telling you to get into real estate for passive income, and you should have a diversified portfolio. So here I am with a non-correlated opinion that you should take into account. You should listen to lots and lots of folks and reach your own conclusions. If you see a thread through all the advice that you receive, then there's probably some truth to that thread. But if you have one crazy person, and maybe it's me, that says things that nobody else is saying, perhaps they're wrong. If you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you want to see more videos of this type, go ahead and subscribe, and you can click on that little bell to be notified when I post another video. Thanks for watching.